I know we had another statement, reference
Yes.
from 1550, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this one's from 1550, and this statement is, really, this statement is addressing the people that they were being called Negroes. So this one, it says that a Spanish official wrote to the king, and again, this was in 1550. And it says, in the island of Puerto Rico, there were above 15,000 Negroes and less than 500 Spaniards. And in all of Hispaniola, there may be 2,000 Spaniards, and there are over 30,000 Negroes. The same is the case in the island of Cuba and in Veracruz, Puerto de Caballos, which is in Honduras, and in Nombre de Dios, Cartagena, Santa Maria, and the coast of Venezuela, where there were 20 Negroes to one white man.
Wow. Okay, so basically what they're stating is that the population is a Negro population, without a doubt.
Yeah, exactly, because at that point, there was only a few hundred Africans that had been brought over to the Americas by that time. Maybe a low count, I'm not sure exactly what the count, but there was no way that all of these people could have been in African stock.
Okay, and just to remember, we're talking about the islands also. So, you know, this is for later, but we're not speaking in reference to the United States as of yet. These numbers are the numbers that are on the islands. We haven't gotten to what they would consider mainland United States yet.
Well, this is the islands, and around the islands in Mexico, Venezuela, Honduras. So this is all in the Gulf area, which is where they were exploring.
Okay, but we haven't touched on Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, or any of these southern states yet.
No, not yet.
Okay, okay. So let's go to
but
part
we
two.
did. But the first point that we did mention, it did mention about the Carolina coast people
being of a dark complexion
right.
as well.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
That was 1524.
Yes, correct. So that statement was before this statement was made.
All right, so let's skip to number 2, and then what does the article, the Adonai article states as far as number 2 is concerned?
Okay, well, number 2 was some Native American tribes held slaves.
Okay, and okay, so you know, and I know that unfortunately, or for different reasons, we did as Native Americans, we would hold slaves, but not necessarily in the way that it would be perceived. I know some of us would, I know some of them would be family, where we would allocate some of our brothers and sisters or some of our children as slaves in order to fall under these different tax brackets in order to keep them safe or from being sold into other forms of slavery.
That's true.
Yeah. So yeah, that as far as that's concerned, yes, natives held slaves, but so did everyone else at that time.
Yes, there were many free blacks who were also slave owners. And again, some of that was true also with them, is that they were holding family members and they wanted to keep families intact. But there were some that also just, they could afford, they had slaves.
And I'll just also make the point that Native Americans were being used as slaves as well.
Oh,
and
yes,
so just because you were a slave, that didn't mean that you came from Africa. And as a matter of fact, later on, we'll see more than likely they were of a Native American stock rather than African, as far as being on the mainland United States.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Okay, so number 2 is basically, that's correct.
Yes.
They did hold slaves.
Oh, yes, they did. Yes, they did.
And so let's go to number 3.
Okay, number 3. You do not have Indian up in your family.
Okay.
I find that very interesting. I want to read a little bit more of that statement, though,
Okay.
because it goes on to say, as Harvard University historian Louis Case Jr. wrote in 2009, only 5% of all Black Americans have at least 12.5% Native American ancestry, the equivalent of at least one great-grandparent. So he's saying that only 5% of Black Americans have Native in their family.
Okay. And where would he get that number from? Do you know?
That I have no idea. We need to ask him.
Okay. Okay. So, but let's look at some real numbers.
Well, before we look at numbers, let's look at a statement.
Okay. Okay.
I have a statement that is from the 19th annual report from the Bureau of American Ethnology. This is 1897 to 1898. This is a publication that comes out from the Smithsonian Institute. And the statement reads as, the Indians associated and intermarried with the Negroes until they finally lost their identity and were classed with that race, so that a considerable portion of the blood of the Southern Negroes is unquestionably Indian.
Wow, that's a very profound statement. And you said this came from the Smithsonian Institute?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
19th annual report. Okay, this was in
1897.
1897. Okay, so now let's look at this point for a few minutes and go back to the statement. Because, it states that in the statement that Mr. Gates says that, what is it about? 5% of Black Americans have Native in their blood. And here we have have the state,
From the Smithsonian Institute.
For the state, so that they could give an appropriate proportion of what was really going on culturally here in the United States.
That's correct, yes.
And in that statement it says, well, first it says that the Indians associated and intermarried with the Negro. Now again, Negro is a term that they use to classify the indigenous population since the time of their arrival.
That's correct.
And so what Negroes are we talking about?
Exactly. We don't know which Negroes they're talking about, and especially during slavery, that the Indians and the Black, they were all grouped together
and classified as
Negroes.
Okay, and then so that's when the numbers really begin to be of importance. But before we get to the numbers, let's finish this statement. And it says, until they finally lost their identity and was classed with that race. What race was that? The Indians are now being classed with the Negro.
Yes.
However, the Indians were always called Negro. And so now we have an identity reversal, almost, where you're going to classify a Negro as having to be from Africa. And so there we go, stripping away the racial identity of the Black population.
And the ethnic identity.
And their ethnic. And then it goes, it says, so that a considerable portion, and I don't think considerable portion is 12.5%.
Correct.
I don't think so. I think considerable portion would be more than 50%, not necessarily 12.5. And so, there's a lot more that we need to go into. But before we do, let's take a small break, and we're going to make sure that we get right back to this point so that we can give the viewing audience some more factual information. All right, thanks. We'll be right back with more of An American Deception. Factual information. All right, thank you. We'll be right back with more of An American
Where's my
Deception.
phone? Where's my phone?
Your phone?
Yeah. Oh my God. I gotta write that down, yo. Wado. I'm gonna write that down. Wado. Tell me what the next one says.
MVDA. Gracias. Gracias.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I missed. I'm
This
sorry.
one? It's all good.
One more.
Okay. Tawu Anduk. Tawu Anduk. Yakoke. Yakoke. Tawu Anduk. Go back one more time. Gracias. Mexica. Mexica.
YOKOKE.
Thank you, prayer. We return thanks to our mother, the earth, which sustains us. We return thanks to the rivers and streams, which supply us with water. We return thanks to all herbs which furnish medicines for the cure of our diseases. We return thanks to the moon and stars which give us their light when the sun is unseen. We return thanks to the sun that has looked upon the earth with a generous eye. Lastly, we return thanks to the Great Spirit who symbolizes all goodness and who directs all things for the good of his children.
American ethnology, and where it stated that a considerable portion of the blood of the Southern Negro was unquestionably Indian, and how that went against the terms, the words used by Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates Jr., where he wrote in a 2009 piece that only 5% of all Black Americans have at least 12.5% Native American ancestry. And so, let's go back to here, where it's actually a report issued by the government that is saying that most Blacks, have a considerable portion of Indian blood in their bloodline.
The Southern Blacks.
The Southern Blacks, and now Robert Gates is saying, Henry Gates, excuse me, is saying that that is not the case. I don't understand where he's getting these numbers from, but we're going to talk about numbers in a minute. But let's go over this quote for a little bit longer, because not only do you have this quote that states that the Southern Negro is basically Indian, we have other quotes that basically is leaning towards the same thing. And I know that a lot of other issues was going on with regards to slavery and how they were intermingling the two cultures in order to create this new idea or this new, hybrid man that they were to control.
And we have to remember also that they were trying to create a white Black society, free slave society. And so a way that they would be able to do that is by mixing these dark-skinned Native Americans in with the Africans and then calling them all Negroes. Negroes became equivalent to slave. Or really, actuality, slave became equivalent to Negro.
Correct. Because the Negro, we were being called Negro from the time of their arrival.
Yes.
And so that Negro became synonymous with being a slave. Where if you were a Negro, then by law, then you had to be a slave. And by law, if you were a slave, then you had to be from Africa. And thereby stripping our native or our indigenous roots away from us legally.
Yes.
Now I have a quote here. We were talking about slaves and the intermingling of the two cultures and percentages and numbers, since people want to talk about blood and quantum, and you don't really have native in your blood. So let's go over the quote.
Okay, well, one of them is addressing the intermingling of the peoples.
You good?
And this
That's
one
a lot of
is coming
information.
from Slavery in the Cherokee Nation by Patrick Mingus, that is stating that during the transitional period from 1650 to 1750, Africans and Native Americans shared the common experience of enslavement. This sharing of lives often led to marriage. The intermarriage of Africans and Native Americans was facilitated by the disproportionate number of African male slaves to females, which was, here it says 2 to 1, but it was actually more than that. And the decimation of Native American males by disease, enslavement, and prolonged war against the colonists.
Okay, and so basically what they're saying is that they were removing the Native American men and introducing the African men into the population in order to breed a black and white society, where you would have either you were black or you were white, and they were really trying to get rid of the native population altogether.
Right, and again, when you have this intermingling, the children because they were in slavery at the time, and this is when slavery was a lifetime sentence, and so, and it also went from the mother, so whatever the mother was, that's what the children were, so if the mother was a slave, then that made the children slave and made the children slave for life also.
I know they had some laws that were being introduced at those times too.
Yes,
You want to go over
yes.
any of them?
Well, we did have
Well, okay, so before we went over the law, did you want to go over the numbers?
yes, that's,
Okay.
yes.
All right, so, okay, well then, you can go ahead and start the numbers, and I can pick up from where you are.
Okay, well, really, these numbers are talking about the men, the slaves that were brought over from Africa to the Americas, not just the United States, but to the entire Americas. But the percentage of the male it has here was 64.5%, and this information is coming from slavewages.org. Okay. So 64.5% of the people that were shipped from Africa were males, and 22.3% were children. So that left only 14% of the people that were shipped over here, only 14% of them were female.
Okay, and so, now, so it was a disproportionate amount of men being shipped into, being put into slavery, as far as the African is concerned.
Yes.
And again, also with the Native American men, they were disproportionately being shipped out or being put into slavery and being removed off of the mainland in order to bring in the African male to the state and to the population.
Yes, another story that is really not told, and that is the large numbers of the native males that were shipped out of the country. Most of them went down to the islands, and as a matter of fact, some of them, when they were introduced back into the States, they were introduced as Negroes. And
Yo, bro, in Hindi and other languages that you know, what does yakoke sound like in your language?
I don't know exactly what the meaning of this yakoke.
But is there words in your language that sound similar,
No.
that have a different meaning? Yakoke?
Yakoke, no. I just know meaning in Hindi, Bangla. Yakoke.
What about Dawu Angkuk?
There is no word like this.
Nothing similar?
Nothing similar.
Or Wado?
Wado.
In Hindi is nothing that sounds like Wado?
I know 100% Bangla.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah. But Hindi, it's like 80%, 70%.
What about in Bangla? Does anything sound like Wado?
Wado. Nothing. Wado.
Nothing?
No. Wado.
Yakoke either?
No.
That's crazy. Yeah, I was thinking maybe that there was a similarity in the language.